Mike, welcome. Good morning. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. It's good to
You're
see you.
welcome. Yeah. It's really good. As I've done a lot of these conversations now, probably 30 episodes or so in climbing. Oftentimes the people that I'm interacting with, I've kind of sought out, via like somewhere on social media. They either have a program that they've set up or an experience that I really want to, talk with them about. And the purpose or only goal of this show is higher vibrations, which I know that's a little, it's a little spiritual, but I just say whatever a person is doing or their experiences that move people towards a higher purpose, if you like, or helping others, that's the end all be all goal. Just trying to learn from other people and what experiences they've had in it, either giving back or giving inward. That's really what we want to focus on. So I love that I didn't meet you through social media. No shade on those I did, but I knew you in real life. We know each other in real life, and that's really cool. So I appreciate you letting me talk you into this.
Oh, 100%.
Um, I'd like to ask you to do an introduction of yourself, whatever it is. It doesn't need to be credentials or this or that. Wherever Mike is at this point in time on whatever day it is in May, I'd love to hear just kind of what you'd like the audience to hear about you.
Sure. Yeah, happy. So thank you again for having me. Yeah, my name's Mike O'Connor. I'm first and foremost a dad and a husband. I live in Apex, North Carolina, and with my wife and three great kids. And I'm a transplant from the Northeast. Moved to North Carolina in '98. I think I've actually lived in North Carolina longer than I lived in the Northeast.
Yeah.
And when I'm not hanging out with my family and kids, I play softball for the town of Apex, the kind of beer league softball stuff.
Yeah.
And then during the day, my role is my title is the business development director, marketing guy for New Hope Treatment Centers. New Hope is a family-run and family-owned and operated behavioral healthcare company that works with adolescents who suffer from psychiatric illness. And my job for New Hope is to build relationships with individuals external to New Hope so they know how to access our services. And I love doing that. I love talking. I love meeting people. I enjoy engaging. And so if, each and every day, if a kid receives services, whether it's at New Hope or anywhere else, because of what my team and I do, then
Yeah.
that's a good day.
Right.
So that's me.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, no
Yeah, and
worries.
I definitely want to dig into New Hope Treatment Centers and hear what you're kind of doing real world right here and
Sure.
now. I would love to hear a little bit about I'm going to call your sort of your background or your experiences, or even just, the evolution of you of what led you to this. Cause I think, but I want to learn more. You've done some things even prior to New Hope that was, call it a stepping stone or call it whatever it is in sort of your life. Can you kind of dig into some of the things that maybe led you to focusing on children, maybe in particular, but those needing psychiatric care? What have you done previous to that, or even what was your upbringing? What
Yeah.
got you involved in sort of thinking in this way?
Yeah. So I'm happy to share all that. So I grew up in, like I said, in a small town, well, in the Northeast small town called Longmeadow, Massachusetts. My mom, the maternal side of my family, my mom and my grandmother on my mother's side had a large impact on me growing up as a kid. Um, my grandmother and my mother and her family, so my mom and her mom and dad and her brothers grew up on the grounds of the Northampton State Psychiatric Hospital in Northampton, Massachusetts. My grandfather was the head electrician. My grandmother was a psychiatric nurse, so they had a house on site. And then I remember as a kid in our household, my mom and grandmother talking about those days they called on Hospital Hill and how they would have adult patients over for dinner. It was a different environment back then in the
Yeah.
40s and 50s, right? It's
Right.
different than it
Right.
is today. Um, and so, like, hearing those stories certainly had an impact on me. And then as I was growing up, middle school, high school, my mom worked kind of in this space. She worked for a community mental health provider in Western Massachusetts, running their like recreation programs.
Yeah.
And I would, like, after school, I would go help her. And so I was around adult psychiatric patients living in the community, and they have like an activity center, and I would be there with my mom engaging with those individuals. So that certainly played a role, I think. I don't know if I knew it at the time, but
Right.
that kind of played a role in the evolution of me. I was a terrible student in high school, kind of got in a lot of trouble. Like, I was that guy.
Right. Were you the class clown? Was that
Little
you?
bit of a class clown,
Yeah.
real social. Grades weren't really my focus. It was more or less a social thing being in school.
Right.
And so after I graduated high school, I had no plans. All my buddies were going away to college.
Right.
I was painting houses, and that was going to be what I did. I was going to just paint houses.
Okay.
Um,
But did you enjoy it? I mean, you found it, I guess, fulfilling enough. You're like, this is just what I do. Like, you didn't, at that point in time, I guess you were just, was it one of those situations where you're like, I don't like school. Like, I'm not doing
yeah,
anything else after this. I'm just ready to earn money. And I clock in, I clock out, I paint what I paint, and that's it. Is that kind of,
I think I didn't like school. I knew that. I grew up in a town that had some wealth. There was a lot of, like, everybody was going to 4-year colleges.
right.
Nobody in my family had ever graduated college.
Okay.
My dad had quit high school and joined the Navy. My mom may have taken some like secretarial kind of schooling, but school wasn't a big focus for whatever reason. And so I'm painting houses the summer after I graduated high school. My mom pulls up to the job site, tells me that we're going to lunch. She's going to take me to lunch. I was like, great, be a nice day. She drove to the local community college, and I thought, well, this is strange. Are we going to eat lunch at the community college?
Right.
And she said, you're going to just sign up for some courses today. I was like, Mom, I don't want, and she's like,
Right.
well, you're going to be embarrassed when I kind of like drag you across this campus and have you sign up. And I was like, all right, we'll sign up. So long story short, I signed up for some community college basic, like liberal arts, English, all the things you got to do.
Right.
And I took a psychology course and a sociology course. And those were things like formally got interested in.
Did you
High
choose
school,
those by yourself, or did your mother lead you towards that? What made you, painting houses and not even wanting to be at a community college campus, let alone sign up for a course? Were those interesting though because of the background? Because of, I think it was your grandmother, not your mother, being a psychiatric nurse. Did you feel like, okay, that's
yeah,
comfortable enough that maybe I'll learn?
I think it was probably that, but it was probably like, I know I'm not good at math. I
Right?
know I'm not good at science. I
Yeah.
like people.
Yeah.
Grandma and mom were kind of in this, so let's just pick these things.
Right.
And so the when I was interested in what I was learning, I became a better student, and so I progressed from there. And it's not like I did great things as a college student, but I eventually, in 4 years, had a 4-year degree, left community college, went to a 4-year school, finished up, and and I was happy that my mom decided to make me do that, because I'd be on a ladder somewhere in Western Massachusetts today,
Right.
painting a house, and no judgment with that.
Right.
But I've experienced a lot. My world's much bigger because of getting my degree, right?
Right.
So
Right.
then after college, I didn't know what I really wanted to do. I knew I wanted to work in my space some way, somehow. And I found an ad in the newspaper to be a outdoor wilderness counselor for at-risk kids.
Okay.
And I answered that ad. I went to like a job interview, which was a 2-day visit at this program in Rhode Island. You worked 24 hours a day, 5 days a week. You lived in the setting, outdoors. And I left that 2-day like job interview and thought, well, I'm never going to do this. I mean, I don't have the patience.
Right.
And the guy who was doing the interview, still a friend of mine today, the guy who hired me first, called me. He's like, hey, have you thought about it? Is this something you want to do? And even though when I left, I was thinking, there's no way I'm going to do this, my answer to him on the phone was yes. And I'm not really sure where the yes came from. My roommate was across the room, looked at me, was like, what are you doing? I'm like, I don't know, man. I just said yes. And I went to go work in that wilderness program. And that was 4 years in Rhode Island. Probably the best 4 years of my work life, because of the work I was doing. It was direct care. It was
Yeah.
outdoors, all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
And then that job led me to North Carolina, where I helped open a program in Vance County on Carr Lake, and I was there from '98 to like 2008, and then I found
Okay.
New Hope. And to be honest with you, I like doing direct care, running away, and then I ran a wilderness program for that organization. Residential care for kids is exhausting. It's
Yeah.
very much involved. You're always on call. I had been married for a couple of years, and I needed to shift gears and do something that was more could accommodate me and my wife, and we want to start our own family. And I stumbled into kind of behavioral health care business development.
Okay.
Somebody said, "Hey, you're good at building relationships. Kinda, you should look into this."
Yeah.
And that's when I started basically working for New Hope, developing relationships with all of our payer sources, doing the more back end stuff,
Hmm.
but really just trying to connect people to services. So
Okay.
that's it in a nutshell. It's a
Yeah.
lot, and I know I rambled there for a little bit. My
No, no, no,
apologies.
no. You didn't ramble. You didn't ramble at all. I want to back up to a couple things. So for this wilderness program that you said yes, and you're like, I'm not sure why I said yes. I just did. Was the wilderness program, was it specific? Could anyone sign up for this, and what are the ages of
Yeah.
the children? And did they have necessarily behavioral things as to why they were doing the program, and the parents were maybe doing it, which may be true, but was it in that kind of context, or it was just anyone who wanted to learn about the wilderness and you were there to kind of help them
So
kind
the
of get
wilderness
acclimated?
pro, yeah, good question. The wilderness program was a nonprofit organization that contracted with the Department of Juvenile Justice in the states in which it operated.
Okay.
So in Rhode Island, they contracted with the Department of Juvenile Justice to offer an alternative setting for kids who are being sent to locked detention facilities.
Right.
In Rhode Island, it's the training school.
Got
So
it.
the judge could basically say, "Hey, you have this crime that you've committed. You either can be committed to the detention facility or the training school, or we have this other option." And those kids would come and do a visit. We'd talk to them, and they had a choice. You can go
Right.
sit in jail, or you can choose to do this wilderness program, which is going to challenge you.
Yeah.
It's going to make you angry, mad, frustrated, but you're really going to gain some skills that you might need
Right.
returning into your home school and your family.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
Thank you for kind of rounding that out. So,
Yeah.
so in the wilderness program, were they completely immersed? Were they on site? They had food, water, shelter, and they stayed there 24/7. Was it a back and forth between their home and there? How did that work?
Yeah. It was definitely residential 24/7.
Yeah.
Um, it sounds, uh, wilderness, living outdoors. The program was sat on like 200 acres. And on the
Okay.
200 acres were like miniature campsites where we lived in tent structures that we actually designed and built out of trees. I mean,
Wow.
think about
Wow.
that. But inside the tent structure, I mean, they stood high enough to where, you had beds and you had a wood burning stove for the winter. And you had like the maintenance guys would build you the platform for that tent structure. But there was also a school on site. There was a dining hall on site. There were
Right.
common, therapy offices on site. So you lived with your little group,
Yeah.
but you would go to the dining hall for meals, and there was a shower house on site, and there was a library on site. So
Right.
it wasn't like sitting in the middle of the woods and in a
Right.
tent from Eastern Mountain Sports or something that you
Right.
that you lie down in. And
I
but
got
we
it.
would do like 30-day river trips in Florida or backpack the Adirondacks in New York. That was part of the programming. The
Yeah.
kids would live in that program anywhere from like 8 to 12 months or so.
Okay. All right. So 8 to 12 months. So regardless of maybe whatever the crime that they had committed and what they might have spent in jail, this was an 8 to 12 month thing regardless. Does that sound right? It didn't line up to what the penalty was, if you will?
It really depended on their treatment plan and how they were doing achieving those goals
Okay.
and evidence of maladaptive behaviors going away, right?
I
So
got
a
it.
lot of the kids we dealt with were out where, they had aggression issues.
Right.
They had decision making issues. Um, so if the program was working and they were working the program and they were able to be consistent on their goals,
Right.
then there was conversations about them graduating. And some kids got to that program and were like, dang, I need to get on this. I'm going
Right.
to work my tail off. And
Yep.
then there were some kids who spent a lot of time doing nothing
Right.
and just wasting time. And
Right.
that was the thing about that program. It didn't matter if you were that accelerated kid with a lot of motivation. If you were the kid who said, bump this, I'm not going to do anything.
Yeah.
Okay. You're going to be here a long time doing nothing as
Right.
much as you dislike this place. And then eventually those kids would come around.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Um, you must have a lot of, well, I would say you must have a lot of patience, but maybe, I'm thinking about it just in like my regular day to day, talking with customers or whatever else, if you're thinking of customers, you're thinking of kids. What I mean is some kids are going to take a long time. They'll eventually come around. And I'm sure that is exhausting for you as a provider to see, maybe shreds of light within them that you're like, you can do this. Like you really could, there's things that you could take these 8 or 12 months and really convert something to something good for yourself, not just in general. And then others who kind of accelerate for that. And was it fulfilling enough for those that were on that accelerate track that gave you inspiration to lean into the ones that, were kind of just there spending time? How for you over that period of time did you kind of make each day to day not be exhausting for you? Because I know you mentioned it was exhausting. I'm sure it
Yeah.
was.
You were going to be exhausted anyway, but
Yeah.
it was emotionally challenging. You had to have the emotional maturity to know that as difficult as these kids were, they got a bad they didn't have an easy, they didn't choose to be there.
Right.
Nobody, you had to have the belief that kids, when they enter this world, aren't predetermined to be a pain in the neck and break laws.
Right.
There's a reason why they ended up there, right?
Right.
And so if you understood that, no matter how difficult or challenging a kid was, and you knew there was a good kid in there,
Yeah.
you don't get me wrong, you would be tired and burned out, but if you kept that at the forefront of your mind,
Yeah.
that you could reach these kids and that every kid was inherently good,
Yeah.
and that you were responsible for guiding them, the motivation was there.
Yeah.
There, it's tough. We all live. I know where you live. You know where I live. You see like a Facebook post on, oh, there were some kids up at the clubhouse and they were up to no good. And these kids, what are they doing today? All right. We're all kids. We all made bad
Right.
decisions. My question is, did you talk to them? Did you
Right.
ask them not to do what they were doing that they weren't supposed to be doing?
Yeah.
Well, no, I just posted it here on the neighborhood Facebook page.
Right.
Well, that didn't solve anything.
Right.
Um, so, so yeah, I hope that answered your question. I got so many views and feelings about that time that I spent there and about the kids that I worked with. Um, I mean, I could go on forever.
Right. No, I understand it, and it does answer my question. So, when you're wanting to see the goodness in everyone and know there's, the kid chose to be in this program, but they didn't necessarily choose their upbringing. They didn't choose
Yeah.
what happened to them that might have led it to them. And it's not a dismissal of what they've done, right? Because not all
No.
kids who have a bad upbringing might not do that. But to not give up on a child, especially, and stay within your heart, Mike, to just say, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna see it through. Yes, it's exhausting, but this is about this kid. And just like you
Yeah.
mentioned, like if a kid messes up, sure, there's some disciplinary things that maybe us as parents, you and I are both parents, like you want to do, but also they have their own minds, they have their own hearts, they're going to make their own decisions. We're not always going to be around every single day or when they grow up, so they're going to have to decide for themselves what kind of person they want to be.
Right.
um,
And kids need structure and boundaries, by the way, and that's what that program offered. I mean, it wasn't all tree hugger kumbaya stuff. It was,
right.
you needed that and you needed a big heart to do it, but you also needed to be firm. You needed to be fair. And
Right.
those kids needed to know you weren't going to give up.
Right.
Those kids had had a lifetime of no structure, no boundaries, people giving up, not really caring what I did. My parents or my caregiver or whoever didn't care that I left at midnight last night and walked the streets of
Right.
Providence, Rhode Island. Well, I do, and we're not doing that here.
Right.
You might be the first person in their life to offer that.
Yeah. This is kind of the often used term that I use, even that, even as a child, no publicity is bad publicity, meaning no attention is bad attention. So if I'm getting in trouble or I'm going and leaving at midnight and I get home and get yelled at, well, at least that's attention. Maybe I think some kids kind
Oh
of
yeah.
operate that way. Maybe not consciously, but I think subconsciously. Mike, how did you evolve as a person? I think you said that was 4 years, and then when you moved to North Carolina, you did another one for 10. Um,
Yeah, it's the same organization, just
okay,
a program here. I tell people all the time I would not be where I'm at today as a parent, as a
yeah,
husband without that experience, right? I learned a lot. Kids taught me probably more than I ever taught them. Um, just the perseverance. I was a little bit of a lazy guy. I mean, I admitted it. All I wanted to, I didn't want to like work hard in school. School was hard enough. That was the most challenging thing I'd ever done at that point in time in my life, and it prepared me for who I am today. Right.
yeah,
I like to think I have good kids, but I think my kids are a little bit of a disadvantage. I met my wife through that program, so here we are. We're very experienced in kids and behavior and all that stuff. And sometimes I tell my oldest son, I'm like, dude, you got to make some mistakes. Like, make some mistakes. You just
right,
can't make the life altering mistakes,
right,
right?
right,
And what I worry about the most for my own kids is, when I was in high school, if somebody passed me a joint at a party and I chose to smoke a joint, it was a joint. It was
right,
marijuana. I tell my son all the time. I mean, somebody could pass you something today, and you don't know what's in it.
right,
And though, like, I could make that mistake back in the '80s, you cannot make that mistake in the
right,
2020s.
right.
Um,
Yeah, I don't try to say this every day or every week and turn it into a lecture series for my kids, but I do try and convey to them, look, I know you're going to make mistakes. Like I get that, but two things are what I'd really like you to do for yourself. One, tell the truth, even if that truth sucks, even if you're going to get in trouble or whatever else, your punishment or whatever that fallout's going to be within yourself or from me is going to be exponentially better if you just tell the truth. Just come clean, whatever you can. And the second part is try not to make mistakes that are permanent or like longer term things.
yes.
Like if you're gonna make a mistake, like try and make good decisions at least in that context. Um, so you were with the same program. You'd moved states down here, and then I think you already mentioned this, but I just want to make sure I'm clear on it. You decided to move away from that organization because of just you had wanted to plan a family. You and your wife were wanting to do that, and this really didn't probably afford you the time to do all that because it was so immersed. Is that right?
Yeah. I was the director of that program in Vance County for a little while
Yeah,
from '04 to '08, essentially, maybe even a little bit longer. And, I had a house on site at the program, and you're out in the middle of kind of nowhere. The
yeah,
nearest grocery store is 25 minutes away.
right,
School systems weren't great. We
right,
knew we wanted to have kids. And so, 24/7, you're on call. It was time to like shift gears and
yeah,
do something different. I didn't even know exactly where I was going. But a former colleague of mine was like, you're pretty good at talking and you can build some relationships. You should try like business development work. And I was like, well, what does that even? I didn't know that
right,
what I do today even existed, that
right,
there are people who work for mental health agencies that are responsible for building relationships, getting contracts, responding to requests for proposals, going to conferences and flying the company flag and shaking hands and building relationships with stakeholders. So I just kind of found that world and have been doing it ever since.
I got you. I got
Yeah.
you. Do you miss some of that immersed environment that you came from? Now your kids are still school age. I think all of them are, just like mine
Yeah.
are. Um, are there elements that you miss, or are you able to incorporate what you do today, day in and day out, or you're at least able to observe it within the organization? Maybe not what you're doing. Can you get those, shards of light from that you might have missed from before? How does that feel for
Yeah,
you
I
now?
can. I not to the degree, right? What I did initially with the wilderness program was so unique. Um, we're outdoor. If we wanted to stop, I mean, it's such a unique program. If a kid was acting out and having a behavior, we would just stop doing what we're doing. Me and the other 10 kids in the group, and we'd sit down and we'd start talking about it. And whether
Right,
that conversation was 10 minutes or 3 hours, the most important thing was getting that kid through that behavior.
right,
So, like that sort of thing, yes and no. I miss it certainly. What I get rewards from now is success, kids succeeding, our organization. When our organization's succeeding, it means we're doing a good job with kids.
right.
And so when I get to our facility, we have 3 different facilities currently. I can go when I want. I can lead tours. I can just go and hang out with staff, interact with the kids, and that's helpful for me. I can't be too far removed from that.
Right.
I got to touch base with the work that's going on the ground to kind of keep me grounded. Um, and we have at New Hope over the last few years, we've done a much better job of telling our story.
Yeah.
We have a podcast. We've done better with our video on our website and all these things that I've had a hand in doing, and certainly not alone. There's a lot of people pulling in that direction
Yeah.
in our organization. So that story gets told a lot, right? At any residential facility, I don't care if it's New Hope or any one of the thousands of others, each and every day there's like something awesome going on inside those buildings.
Yeah.
And there's also probably something not awesome going on, right? You
Right.
might have a kid who's self-harming on a day, but somewhere in that building on the other side, a kid's getting his graduation, he's getting
Right.
his high school diploma in that setting,
Right.
or he's reunifying with mom. Um, and if you do a quick Google search about residential programming in our country, sometimes it gets a bad rap.
Yeah.
You have folks like who's the famous person who did like a docu-series on the poor treatment they got in a facility. Now, I'm not saying that person didn't get poor treatment, but
Right.
sometimes every residential program provider gets painted in that brush.
Yeah, it's a great point that you bring up, because with any topic, you're going to find something that is a not ideal experience. But does that mean that every single program then is that, or every nonprofit is this, or every not? It's I totally get what you're saying, and so I think one thing you mentioned about reunifying with mom, and this is a thing I'd forgotten about till you said it. This is kind of the beauty of this long form podcast where we can just kind of riff and talk back and
Yeah,
forth. It makes me think of this. I'm pretty sure that that the founder of New Hope, which it's Jay, right? It's Jay.
Jay.
So and I'll put a link to your to New Hope's podcast on YouTube when I send this out, and I'll send you
Fantastic.
everything. You'll have it. You can do whatever you want with it, Mike. Reunifying with parents, and I'm pretty sure that Jay had mentioned in that if a inbound student, if you will, or a patient is accepted, it isn't just the patient that's accepted. In that letterhead, it includes the family of that
Yeah.
child, because, and you can tell me in your own words, please, but it's important that those parents are bought in to the idea and the process, and that there is support. It's not just, I'm sending my kid to some pseudo boarding school and they're going to go get fixed, whatever that might mean, and they come home and they're going to be normal. Like, that's not what this approach is for New Hope, I don't think. Can you tell me in your own words what you feel that is?
Yeah, I think you captured it very well. The kids that we serve, and I would argue any kid that I've ever come in contact with in my career working in a residential setting, right? They had some help getting to us, right?
Right.
And help is probably the wrong word, but things weren't great. Whether it was mom, dad, home, aunt, uncle, not all of the kids we work with have a family system to support them. Some come through to us through the DSS system.
Yeah.
So our goal is obviously, yes, treat the kid, but we got to figure out what this family system looks like, what
Yeah.
reunification is going to look like, and it can't be we're dropping them off. We're
Right.
all in this together. And
Right.
and if little Johnny or Susie doesn't feel that or know that, we're not going to be very helpful. They
Right.
might fake it to make it, or they might just rebel the whole time because what do I have to look forward to?
Right.
You know, I'm going to go back to that same environment
Right.
where there's not a lot of love, care, and support.
Yeah. Can I can I ask, are there, so this is a program similar maybe to what you've done in the wilderness where there's a graduation of sorts, right? There's a time and place for when you do it, and then when you're going to reunify or sort of go back into the community, whatever period of time that is. Are there children that turn themselves around so much that they want to stay? Have you had those examples where they actually are like, I'm enjoying this so much, or they're getting so much back that they actually want to stay, and it's a harder thing for them to want to leave? I'm just curious about if that
Yeah, and
happens.
that certainly happens.
Yeah. What do you
And
do in those
sometimes it doesn't come out in
circumstances?
words; it comes out in their behavior. They might
Yeah.
sabotage their treatment by
Yeah.
self. They break a door, or they put their fist through a wall, and you're thinking, well, wait a minute, what's going on here?
Right.
They've been doing so well, and then your therapist, people at the facility, they're going to know that child well enough to know they don't want to go.
Yeah. I I I have a Well, I'll just come out and say it. Do you have anyone that was a former? I don't like calling them patients, but is that what you call them?
I call them kids.
Okay, right. So thank you. I'm trying to like rationalize like it. It's okay. So these kids that graduate from this program, have any come back and asked to work at New Hope in some capacity?
Yeah, we have a two right now at New Hope. We have
Love it.
Kiara, who's our mental health ambassador. She's
Yeah,
like kind of outward and inward facing. She meets with kids weekly, but she also does community engagement stuff for us. She's part of our podcast. She has her own little piece of it,
I love it.
actually a big piece of it.
Love it.
So Kiara came back. She was with us 15 years ago. And
Yeah.
she recently came back a year or two ago, kind of reached out to us. And then we have a gentleman who works on our unit, direct care, who was with us 10 years ago.
Right.
Um, and he's now working with the kids. And it's powerful when those individuals who have that same shared experience as being in the program as a kiddo can sit down and talk with they know what
Right.
they're going through.
Yeah. I'm a big believer that each of us, there's only one Mike, right? And Mike should be known as you. Don't be some persona, don't be something else. You're just experiencing what life is for you, and you're sharing that outward with people. And that isn't. I've recently let go that's, to me, that almost sounded like egotistical for me. Like, I'm going to share who Adam is, and well, what do I know? I mean, I'm not, everything I'm doing is not quote unquote right, but it's also not wrong. And
Right.
if what I share with someone, they can glean something from it for themselves. Um, the experiences that even this, those two who were kids and now have come back, or even you and what you shared, or me, or anything, you, when you've been through something and it has either worked or it's done something for you, and you share that with other kids, it probably feels different than maybe being like, well, there's this person who they had a great upbringing, and they never had it like me. They never had the struggles that I went through. And I think that can be really, really powerful for kids to hear about. And maybe it's more than giving them hope. I would think it would inspire them to be like, look, you're okay. Just be you. Work through what you need to. That's kind of what that says to me. That's really powerful, I think.
Yeah, there's a whole model of care, and I'm not an expert on it, but I know of it, right? It's called peer support. So, it, and I certainly can speak to North Carolina. North Carolina, you can find peer support specialists that have lived experience with whatever substance use, right?
Yeah.
If I'm looking for substance use treatment, I could probably find a peer support specialist to help me through that journey. And there's also peer support for teens. So it's a powerful, I'm sure there's evidence behind that works,
Right.
but that's like a formal service line that individuals can access.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So as a parent and anyone listening to this, how would someone like, I'm a parent and a father of five, three stepchildren and two biological. And so now I know where you live, I know I could contact you, but just
Right.
for anyone, across the state of North Carolina, or maybe it's larger than that. I know you have facilities in other areas, at least in the region, the East. So say I had a child as a parent who's either gotten in trouble in school or something maybe more, involved in that criminal or whatever. How do they find their way to New Hope, and how does that tie in for you? I mean, you mentioned about services, and I know you need to hop here pretty soon, but I just want to kind of understand from an end parent or an end user standpoint, how do they find New Hope? Is it a referral that they stumble upon New Hope, or something maybe on your social media or podcast? How do they find you?
Yeah. So I'll say this: we're never the first option for kids, right? Forgive me, I had a
Oh, it's okay.
reminder pop up that I just closed. We're never the first option. We're typically the last. The
Yeah.
kids we're serving at our facility, they've been placed out of the home previously. We're
Right.
the highest level of care. So, but kids who get to us, there's always a mental health professional already involved with that child.
Right.
And there's always like an MD and typically a psychiatrist working with that child and family. And when they've tried these other levels of care, outpatient therapy, in-home counseling, maybe lower levels of out-of-home placement, and when those things have not worked for whatever reason, that's when a referral to New Hope is appropriate. And
Right.
so that's where my team comes in, right? We're well networked, providers know who we are, we're credentialed with and contracted with insurance companies. Nobody pays out of pocket to come to New Hope. It's an insurance, Medicaid and other commercial and other
Right.
insurances pay for it. So there's this whole network and system. But a real black and white answer is we have a great website, newhopetreatment.com, where people can find us.
Yeah.
We've got social media pages where we'd like to tell our story, but the easiest way, if there's somebody who hears this and they're like, I want to contact somebody at New Hope, they can call me directly, 919-931-3471, or go to our website. And whether it's New Hope or any, other, I'm going to connect a kid and a family to a service, whether it's appropriate for us or anybody else.
Yeah.
We never just say, yeah, you're not a New Hope candidate. We
Right.
say, okay, here's the last thing I did before I got on the call with you today was I was talking to a family about their kiddo, and I referred them to a specialized provider in Virginia that would be a better fit for that kid.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you for sharing that and being so open about it.
Yeah.
I'll put as many of the links as I can on this podcast too. I mean, when I send out some clips, I'll send them all to you. You can do whatever you want with them.
Sure.
Mike, thank you for making the time today, and the trust and the willingness, and just being so open-hearted and the person that you are, and sharing your experience. Thank you. I appreciate it very much.
It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm honored that you asked me to do it. And I appreciate our relationship, and this was wonderful and a great opportunity. Whenever I can talk a little bit about helping kids and families, I'm going to jump all over it. So thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. I would love to have you back. We'll talk more about that so I can persuade you over time. But keep being you. I know you will. But I'm very, very proud of what you've done over your life, and you making the choice to give back to other people that you hadn't met before, even while having a family and raising a family. That's beautiful. So thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate you.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam.
You're welcome. All right. Hang on for a couple minutes while we let this do its thing. Thank you everyone for joining.
This somehow merges?
It does. It does. Yeah. Once we stop recording, it just merges up, and then I can send it out. So
nice.
Thank you again, Mike. And thank you everyone who's listening. Goodbye, everyone.